Dear viewers, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Danilo Lubkiewski, and I'm glad to welcome you on behalf of the KU Security Forum. Despite many pessimistic predictions, NATO membership of Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and I believe in the future, free Belarus. Many in Ukraine and the European Union deserve the credit for this decision. I trust that Ostanні and Andrius Kubilius and the respective teams remember how the story started very well. At the same time, the decision of the European Union comes 2 days after President Zelensky left Washington without pledges of fresh military support. What do these developments mean? What will the decisions of the European Council provide Ukraine with in practical terms? What may be the additional sources of Western aid? How will political stalemate in the United States Congress influence the overall situation? Will the West continue to support Ukraine and keep up to the promise to stay with Ukraine as long as it takes, instead of the newly appeared version, as long as we can? We will discuss these questions with our distinguished speakers. I'm glad to introduce them. Andrius Kubilius, member of the KU Security Forum Security Council, the former Prime Minister of Lithuania, and now he is a member of the European Parliament. I thank you, Andrius, for joining us, for taking part in this conversation. Ambassador Michael McFaul, Director of Freeman Spaulding Institute for International Studies at Stanford University and former United States Ambassador to Russia. I thank you, Michael, for joining us. Philip Zelikow, professor at the University of Virginia and former counselor at the United States State Department. I thank you, Philip, for being with us, and I'm happy to introduce Ostanні, former Prime Minister of Ukraine and the chairman of the KU Security Forum. Without further ado, I wish to start with Andrius Kubilius. Andrius, if I may. How do you assess the results of the summit, of the European Union summit? What do these decisions, these results mean strategically? Skeptics say that the European Union talks may take years. It is also unclear when talks on our accession will start. They could be months away. So, what's your assessment? What's your take on these decisions? You're welcome.
Well, thanks a lot, Danilo, and thanks a lot, Ostanní. Definitely, in my view, those decisions have really historical significance. And congratulations to Ukraine, congratulations to all Ukrainians who are fighting not only for their independence and they are defending the whole Europe, but also they are fighting for their choice to be, part of European family. Now, really, of course, negotiations will not be very easy. I still remember how we went through, but I hope that European Union will manage to overcome its own problems and challenges, which for time being we can call them Hungarian challenges, and European Union will manage to come back to ambitious enlargement as it was with Central Europe and Baltic states back at the end of 1990s. I will remind that at that time negotiations with Lithuania took 3 years. It started in 1999, it took 3 years. In 2002, we concluded negotiations. And in 2004, after ratification of the treaties, we became full members of EU. So that is why, in the European Parliament, we just passed a resolution just before, summit, where we really asked, summit to give a positive, decision. But also we said that the whole enlargement, with all the procedures, with all the negotiations and so on, should be concluded before the end of this decade, so before 2030. And I hope that we shall manage to do it. We need to do that because Ukrainian membership in EU is needed not only for Ukraine itself, it's very much needed also for the whole European Union.
I thank you, Andrius. There are a number of questions related to the European Union that our audience is very interested in. I will name 2 of them. I will start from the first question. First of all, you mentioned Viktor Orban, and for many in Ukraine, it is absolutely unclear how it may be acceptable for the European Union that only one voice can easily undermine the security and future of the Union. How would you explain this phenomenon of Viktor Orban? How influential is this phenomena in the European Union now? And isn't it clear for the European Union that, in my opinion, he plays on the Russian side? You're welcome.
I will not deny your conclusion, the last conclusion. If to talk about Viktor Orban as a personality, really we can just guess why he's behaving in such a way, which is, really unacceptable, and which is, very much damaging not only, Ukraine issue, but it's also damaging the whole EU, including Hungary. So that's one thing. Second, the reason is really not just, personality of Viktor Orban, but the reason is also that EU rules, EU treaty is saying that, important decisions in European Union, especially on its foreign policy, they should be decided unanimously. So each country of 27 countries has the veto right. The difference in between of such countries, like Lithuania or Germany, and Hungary for time being is very simple. We are not, using this veto right in such a way like Hungary is using for time being, So veto right can be used only if really your national interests are in some way, can be, damaged by some kind of decisions. But, you cannot play and blackmail all the union like now it's done by Viktor Orban. And that is why, again, inside of European Union, there is quite a lot of demands to change those rules, to change the treaty, in order to abandon this veto right in general.
It only proves how fragile the situation is, since what I feel we live in the time of blackmails, local blackmails. We can see it in the European Union. We watch them in the United States. But let me finish with the second point that I would like to clarify with you, Andrius. The Council couldn't reach an agreement for new 54 billion package for Ukraine, of Ukraine support. The talks will, and this is today's decision, if I'm not mistaken, the talks will resume in the new year. How would you explain that? What do you think about the perspective of this big, large financial package? You're welcome.
As I understand, again, Viktor Orban used his veto right, and that is why, formally the decision was not made. But what is good that 26 countries really, as I understand, they agreed in general on the whole package, on those all 50 billion, 54 billion euros, and it will be done. I see another problem, which is maybe not for this discussion to discuss, but I see the problem that besides those financial resources which we are giving to Ukraine budget, there is much bigger need really to support Ukraine military in a much larger scale. Because I looked into the numbers, how much Russia is spending for military, needs during this year from public sources. My calculation is that Russia is spending more than 100 billion euros. On another side, Ukraine, which is spending 40 billion for military needs, and this is 25% of Ukraine GDP. If to add what United States and Europe is giving for military needs, we're getting only 80 billion euros, which Ukraine can spend for its defense. Which means that the West, for time being, is supporting Ukraine just not to lose the war, but the West is still not giving enough of support for Ukraine to win the war. And that is what I see as the biggest need and the biggest request in the West to, at the end, to make very clear decision that it's our task and our goal is to achieve that Ukraine is able to win and Russia needs to be defeated. So I hope that we shall manage also to push such kind of understanding in the West.
Do you believe there is still a consensus in the European Union on this strategy? Do you think that there is an overwhelming majority in the European Union who will support Ukraine?
Well, at least what we have seen, yesterday in the Council, so 26 countries supported, in a very clear way, a geopolitical decision to start negotiations with Ukraine. Of course, European Union is not, still, how to say, gearing up to, to support on a military with a military assistance on such a scale which is needed. European, military industry is quite weak, but we need to do, we need to change that situation and to have, much larger support of military needs of Ukraine.
Andrius, I thank you very much. On behalf of the Kyiv Security Forum, and I believe that Ostanny will support me, that we would like to thank you very much for all your support with regards to Ukraine and all your efforts and solidarity with our nation. We do appreciate it. We know that you are our true and great friend. And yesterday's victory is not only ours, but yours personally. And we do thank you, and we thank your team for all these efforts that led us to this result.
Danilo, I need to thank, first of all, Ukrainians for what you are doing, for what you are sacrificing. And that is really why we need to be grateful to you. Thanks a lot. I need to switch to another meeting. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrius.
Thanks. Bye.
And now I will turn to the American affairs, and I would like to invite Ambassador Michael McFaul to answer our questions. And thank you, Michael, for joining the conversation. I believe that you know that yesterday, Vladimir Putin, you know this person very well, once again proved that he's totally obsessed with Ukraine. I mean, literally, he's totally obsessed. Ukraine is his trauma. But the main addressee of his long speeches at his annual press conference was the West. He humiliated the West, correct me if I'm wrong. He looked very satisfied with what he saw in the West. While the United States Congress finds it possible to dive into domestic disputes and blackmail, can Putin celebrate the success of his obsessed logic? What's your opinion? You're welcome.
Well, first, thanks for having me back. It's good to see you guys. Second, before I get to our very troubling domestic politics, I just want to echo what a historic day yesterday was for your country, for Europe, for anybody that believes in democracy and freedom as I do. It was a truly historic day. And Danilo and Arsenij especially, you played a big role in that. You should be very proud of that achievement. Ukrainians made this happen. Brussels did not make this happen. You demanded this through revolution, through the sacrifice of your soldiers, and through the perseverance of your government and your parliament. I'm thinking of Olga Stefanishyna right now and the tremendous work that you have done to get to this point. And I just want to say, I'm in deep admiration of what you've done. These are historic moments that will be recorded in your history books for decades and centuries to come. So congratulations. Now back to the less fun topic of our domestic politics, Danilo. I don't know what to say. I find it very frustrating because in my conversations with members of Congress, senators, their staffers, there's actually quite a bit of support for this assistance package, right? The majority of senators support that idea when you talk about it in the abstract. The last major vote that they had in the House of Representatives before the fiasco that led to the downfall of Speaker McCarthy was a vote, and it was 300 in favor of support, 100 against. And I think that's very important for Ukrainians to remember, because there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of memes that there's been this dramatic fall in support for Ukraine. It is not exactly true. If there was a straight up vote, it would go through. But two things are happening. One is and maybe it was unfortunate that President Biden himself, by the way, decided to tie these things together in his initial aid package. I'm very interested what Philip thinks about that. I'm not an expert on the Congress, but when he decided to do that, I know the thinking was this will make it easier to get it through. But when in doing so, it then tied things together that I don't think should be voted on together. I want a big debate about immigration reform in the United States. We need to have that debate, but we should not have that debate. We should not avoid that debate by holding Ukrainian soldiers hostage so that we can speed through a reform without having that debate. And that's what's going on right now. And I think it's wrong. The second thing that deeply disturbs me is I feel like many members of Congress do not understand the big strategic implications for American security of doing this. I'm not even talking about your security. I'm talking about our security. If we look feckless, we look like we can't do what's in our own interests, that emboldens all of our enemies, not just Vladimir Putin, but all over the world. And it makes those in the middle hedge their bets. They're thinking, oh my goodness, maybe the Americans are not capable of doing what's even in their own interests. Maybe I need to have more conversations with our Chinese folks. Maybe we need to hedge our bets. That is not good in terms of American national interests. And so just from somebody who cares about my country, I find this debate very disturbing. I'm cautiously optimistic that maybe there might be a way that they get this done and that they have extended the days to discuss it. That's a good sign, and maybe there's a deal to be done. But generally speaking, I do not think this is the way we should make foreign policy.
I thank you. You know, you mentioned President Biden, and President Biden is being criticized, severely criticized today. Some say he is doing not enough. Some say that this is more than enough. But the bottom line is that the strategy of no escalation and very gradual support of Ukraine did not produce what was really needed to defeat the aggressor. In your opinion, what may convince President Biden to give the green light to Ukraine's membership in NATO, and what will his administration do now? What's your analysis? Please explain for us what may be the logic of the actions of the Biden team. You're welcome.
Well, so first on the history, I tragically agree with you. You know, a year ago in Foreign Affairs magazine, I wrote a piece called The Dangers of Incrementalism. That's exactly what you're talking about. And I said it was dangerous because that was the moment a year ago when it was most ripe for breakthrough on the battlefield. That was the moment when it was most ripe to squeeze Russia with respect to sanctions. And what I said in that piece, I worried that if it was incremental, that it would lead to a loss of domestic support in the United States. And that's exactly what's happened. So I agree on the history, but unfortunately, we can't change that now. To your the second thing I would say, right now, it is, in my opinion, the focus has to be, one, on getting this supplemental through, and then two, on putting the legislation in place to take those frozen Russian assets that we have in the United States and our European friends have in Europe, and to put in a mechanism to transfer them to Ukraine. To me, that is the most vital, immediate thing that needs to be done. Third, with respect to NATO, you know, my view has been always that this should have been done a long time ago. I think the mistake, and this goes back decades, not just with the Biden administration, is that we, the United States, Democrats and Republicans, we had a strategy of integration of Russia and supporting democracy in Russia. That failed, of course. We all need to acknowledge that that failed radically. But when we were doing that, we should have had a hedge policy to not try to accommodate or appease the Russians, but to move full steam ahead with NATO expansion and to move full speed ahead with bilateral military support. Think about all the military support we have given your country over the last 2 years. Imagine had we done that in the 1990s and we had shored up your deterrence capabilities, we could have avoided this horrible, tragic war. But that's back to history. with respect to the upcoming summit, I don't see the Biden administration leaning in to membership. I think that's a mistake. My own view, I've written this many times, is that they should use the Washington summit to issue a formal invitation for Ukraine to join. And then, as we all understand, the negotiations for that could go on for many years and probably would only end when the war ends. But I think symbolically, to issue the invitation would be a very important signal, because once that's happened, the train has left the station, right? It's just a matter of time until Ukraine would join. That's my personal view, but I do not think it is the view of the Biden administration.
I thank you. I also would like to raise yet another important topic, and I would like to remind that on the 3rd of November, the Financial Times published an important international appeal initiated by the KSF Security Forum. And it was addressed to the leaders of the United States, the European Union, and the Group of Seven, calling on them to take bold steps and approve the long-awaited decisions to let Ukraine use Russian frozen assets. And I would like to thank you, Michael, for joining this appeal, as you co-sponsor it and co-sign it. In this context, in the context of further actions that may provide Ukraine with additional sources of aid in this dire situation, do you think there is any sign of positive changes on this matter? Do you sense any kind of positive perspective that we may settle this issue? You're welcome.
Well, first, thank you for the things that you did in the Financial Times piece. That was very important. It looks like Philip had to leave, but I also want to congratulate Philip and his colleagues for the work that they've done on this issue. Lawrence Tribe also has published a very important paper talking about why this is legal. And these, we actually, just so you know, I work on sanctions in the Yermak McFall working group. We published a paper on this a year ago, but it went nowhere because we did not have the political power that you all have had and those American colleagues that I mentioned to really force the issue. And it has been tremendous. It has changed. This debate has changed as a result of those forceful interventions that you have been a part of. So thank you for that. I think it's really important. My own view, I talk to members of Congress and the White House about this fairly frequently, and our Secretary of Treasury. I would say two things. If the debate about new assistance to Ukraine is depressing to me in the US Congress, the debate about, it's called the Repo Act, right? The legislation that would reinforce this initiative is moving forward. It's already passed the House 40-2. It's now in the Senate. I just did a big briefing with Senate staffers last week, and my feeling coming away from that conversation is that there is momentum here. Now, I want to be clear, as Lawrence already said, legally, there's a debate legally about this. I just recently published a piece in the Washington Post saying that it's okay. Another group of scholars said, no, it's not okay. It is my firm view that the president already has that authority. It's second, it is also my political view that if we do this first, that will help to embolden our European friends to do it, because after all, that's where the majority of the money is. It's in Europe, it's not in the United States. And that's why I think they should do it. But I also think that the congressional activities, which now have momentum, will make it easier for President Biden to do the right thing. Sometimes you want to tie the hands of the king, right? To say, well, yeah, I didn't really want to do this, but these people over in Congress, they forced me to do it. I actually think the Biden administration wants to do it, but the new legislation will help them to do the right thing. And I've never seen as much momentum on this particular issue as we have right now.
I see. Michael, all these big and small science elements, they, they give grounds for many people, for many experts to speculate on and to, present, to actually to share a lot of different scenarios that may happen in 2024. It's natural. In your opinion, what should we expect in 2024? What do you feel in the air? Do you think that the West is somehow prepares for any form of political settlement, or is ready to support Ukraine as it was promised, as long as it takes? What is your sense? What do you feel?
Well, two things. First about Putin, and then about America. I can't speak for Europe, obviously. First, as you rightly said about Putin in his call-in show, and in a recent meeting he had announcing that he's running for re-election, the least surprising news of the week. Right now, he feels very confident. I haven't met Mr. Putin for 10 years. I got put on the sanctions list in 2014. But before then, I followed his career. I've known him since 1991. And when I was in the government, I dealt with him. And a year ago, he looked very nervous. He even canceled that call-in program. He was so nervous, right? And he was so nervous because you were defeating him on the battlefield. And he became extremely uncertain of himself, the most uncertain I've seen him in his long career. Today, he's not. Today, his soldiers are dug in. He's had tremendous casualties. The U.S. intelligence community just published the numbers. They're just shocking how many Russian soldiers that he has just sent to be slaughtered. But because it's an autocratic regime, it's a dictatorship, it doesn't matter, right? But he is gambling on two things. One, you already discussed about how much money he has to spend on the military versus how much Ukraine and your partners have. And he said very explicitly, we're going to just keep spending. And tragically, you're seeing that their military industrial complex has recovered. And the earlier sanctions that were having an effect on export controls, they found ways around it. And for me as an American, it's tragic to see the data where components from American companies are now reaching Russia to build missiles that are now threatening and killing Ukrainians. And that is just horrible and tragic, and we've got to fix that. But he sees that and he feels confidence. And then that gets me to the second thing. There is no scenario. You're alluding to the fact that there are many politicians in America today that say that you all need to negotiate with Putin and get a settlement, because if you don't, you're going to lose Kherson, you're going to lose Odessa, you're going to lose Kharkiv. Better to take a bad deal now than a worse deal later. I completely disagree with that analysis. And it's not just about my analysis of the battlefield. I'll turn to you guys to talk about that. But there is a naivete from those Americans when they talk about that, about Putin. Putin is not going to negotiate right now. He thinks that time is on his side. And especially, he's not going to negotiate until he knows who the next president of the United States is. So there's no scenario at all. I see zero probability of a negotiation before our election. And you asked me about 2024. That is the most important event of 2024. As an American, I think it's the most important election in my country since 1860. I think it is that big of a deal in terms of the consequences it might have for the stability of our democracy here in the United States. And so tragically, that is the case. I wish it weren't so, but that to me seems to be what I believe, and it's I think it's also the same focus that Mr. Putin has.
Michael, I do thank you very much, and I'm really happy that Lawrence Summers joined our conversation. Thank you very much, Larry, for doing this. Thank you for taking part in our conversation. We do appreciate this.
Glad to be with, very glad to be with you.
Thank you. We just discussed the European, the American affairs, and also I'm really thankful to Ambassador McFall for sharing his views about our joint statement, which was published in November in the Financial Times, calling on the leaders of the G7, the United States, and the European Union to transfer the Russian assets to Ukraine, to compensate the damages of Ukraine and Ukrainians. Sir, you were behind the ideology, I would say, if I may. You were behind the idea that this issue should be properly addressed. I would like to ask your opinion. Do you see the perspective of solving this issue? And how do you generally assess the overall situation with regard to the Western support of Ukraine? You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And it's a privilege to be invited to participate in this forum. What is at stake in the Ukrainian struggle is not just the fate of Ukraine, but the kind of world that we are going to have in the West for the next generation, and the way in which values of openness, of debate, of freedom, of nations' respect for other nations, of global stability are going to be maintained. That is what is at stake. There is no more important issue than this one. A world that cannot resist aggression, wanton, naked aggression, will not be a world that can solve climate change. It will not be a world that can respond to pandemics. It will not be a world that can respond to future aggression. It will not be a world in which cross-border commerce will be predictable and governed by the rule of law. So the outcome here is of the most profound importance. I am deeply disappointed by the failure of the Atlantic Alliance to respond as vigorously and as forcefully as it should have in the last month or two. But I am someone who believes deeply in what it is said, although I think it may not be true, that Winston Churchill said about the United States, that the United States always, always, always does the right thing, but only after exhausting all the alternatives. And I dare to believe, not just desire, but believe, that ultimately the United States will do the right thing and will provide substantial support for Ukraine. Since the last time that I had a chance to participate in a forum of this kind, I think we have made progress. It is now recognized by Secretary of State Blinken. It is now recognized by British Foreign Minister Cameron that mobilizing the reserves is the right thing to do. Substantial legal opinions have been provided by Professor Tribe in the United States, by lawyers at the State Department and the National Security Council, and by many leading international legal scholars. The European Central Bank has recognized that it has a legitimate stake, indeed, I would say a necessary stake, in recognizing that action need to be multilateral rather than unilateral if Europe is to act, given that the majority of the assets, vast majority of the assets, are euro denominated. But when you set conditions for an action, you are recognizing that it is a legitimate and viable action. And that is what is being signaled. And so I believe we are moving closer to the day when this crucial decision will be taken. And I believe that when this decision is taken, the most important thing will be a secure source of funds for Ukrainian reconstruction. And that will complement what is a positive development, which is the vast majority of European nations wanting to support Ukraine's accession into the European Union. But it is not only Ukrainian economic reconstruction that will benefit if this step is taken. A precedent will be set in international law that will, it's not actually a precedent because things like this have happened before in the wake of Iraq, in the wake of the Second World War. An international norm of just compensation will be reaffirmed and will act as a deterrent to any future would-be aggressors. The world is not only short on the political will and the resources to support economic reconstruction in Ukraine, there are huge shortfalls for the so-called global South. There are huge shortfalls with respect to global public goods like climate change. If we are able to use reserves to support Ukrainian economic reconstruction, that will make it easier to support these other global causes as well. I have to say, Denlo, and I've said it many times before, usually as a professor and especially as a professor of economics, I find myself opposing things that seem easy and politically popular on the grounds that they are somehow unsound. This is a case where the obvious, fair, and politically popular thing, taking money from Putin that he already doesn't have and using it for a good cause. This is a case where the expedient thing is also the right and just thing on economic and legal grounds. So I believe we're going to get there, and pray God we get there soon enough. We are all, in a sense, citizens of Ukraine.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate your point. We do appreciate your remarks. And I believe that all we share what you said, that this is a right and just cause. I only wish that these arguments would be heard in different capitals, giving and encouraging the political will, which is necessary in these difficult situation, in the dire situation where Ukraine finds itself today. Nevertheless, your words also prove that there is no despair. And with that, I turn to Ostanny, and I would like to invite Ostanny to share his opinion. What do you think? Will the West continue to support Ukraine? You're welcome.
Well, there is no other option neither for the West nor for Ukraine. You know, I just get the article published on CNN website, and the article says like this: Western officials warn Ukraine is certain to fail against Russia if US doesn't provide more aid. I strongly disagree even with the trend and with the with this article at all, because I would strongly recommend to those who are deeply involved in the Ukrainian affairs, rephrase this and to say it like this, that Ukrainians warn that Ukraine is certainly to win against Russia if US and EU provide more aid. Look, I have a mixture of different feelings. On the one hand, there is a good news. And the good news is that against the backdrop of Putin's reappointment press conference, the European Union found guts and stamina and passed the decision to launch real negotiations with the Ukraine how to make Ukraine a EU member. And that's really good news, and that's a historic decision. On the other hand, as the year approaches to its end, there is a number of challenges we are facing right now. The biggest one is that, frankly speaking, Ukraine doesn't have any kind of real budget. We are out of cash. So there is no financial support neither from the European Union nor from the United States. And it brings us actually to the brink of real disaster. But what I do believe in, I strongly believe in the values, not value. And I believe that our American friends will act as they already acted during this large-scale and full-fledged invasion. So I believe that Republicans will find the common ground with Democrats, and they will save the national security of the United States, not only Ukraine. Because that's not a charity, and this is a widespread message all over the United States, that giving the money to the Ukrainian people is not a charity. In this way, the United States actually underpin and support its national security and its defends its sovereign soil. The same goes with the European Union. On the one hand, they made a pivotal decision and historic decision to launch negotiations with Ukraine. On the other hand, 15 billion euros package aid is still somewhere in the dark. So the next step is actually to pass both of these decisions, both by the US Congress and the European Union. And once again, I want to reiterate, I want to be optimistic, realistic and optimistic, that the free world is to defend the values of the free world. And what is happening in Ukraine relates not only to Ukraine, it's much more than about Ukraine. This is about the fate of the democracy in the world. And the democracy is to show to the autocracy and personally to Putin that there is no any space for dysfunctional democracy. And I strongly believe that Putin will never pop up champagne, because what he saw a few days ago was a real gift for Putin. So let's make a gift to those who fight for democracy, freedoms, and liberties. And Ukraine is at the forefront of this. There is no reason to preach to the choir. And I want to thank to Secretary Summers, to Ambassador Makfol, to the Prime Minister Kubilius, to Professor Zelikov, and to another 30 signatories who signed an appeal to the United States and the European Union asking to confiscate actually and to liquidate the frozen Russian assets. And this is another huge source how to help Ukraine to survive and how to help actually the free world to survive and to win this war. So to wrap up this kind of discussion, first, I do believe that we will prevail. Second, no doubt that this is the war of attrition, and Putin wants to outlast us. He wants to outmaneuver the free world. He believes that he can outweigh. Third, we have to show a very strong signal to everyone, and personally to Putin, that there is no any kind of even small chance for Putin to win in this war. And the best way is not a lip service. The best way is to pass the necessary decision for the Ukraine. From the financial standpoint, that's what is needed for the financial support of Ukraine, and to provide lethal weapon and ammunition for the Ukrainian military and for the Ukrainian men and women in the uniform. The fourth issue is that we need definitely to confiscate Russian assets. It's not only about the way how to offset the damage that have been made by Russians to Ukraine. This is the way how actually to impose justice, how to bring to justice Russians. Fifth, we definitely need to do something with the sanctions. Because look, Putin's regime is easily circumventing sanctions. So that's a very bad sign, and we have to convince everyone that a sanctioned regime is an effective one. And last but not least, I believe that for the year 2024, the most important decision is to be made in Washington, D.C. at the NATO summit. Ukraine needs to get an invitation to join NATO. We need to defend our country under Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. So once again, I am still optimistic, and I believe that we will be stronger after the challenges we are facing right now.
I would like to thank you, Ostanny, for your remarks, and I would like to thank all the participants of our conversation tonight, which is very important for Ukraine and for the Ukrainian audience, as Ukrainians would like to hear, the answers to this vital question, whether the West still with us, whether the West still continues to support our nation. I'm happy that this conversation also sums up our annual activities of the Kyiv Security Forum, and I'm proud that there were a lot of good results within the framework of the Kyiv Security Forum. NATO membership, EU affairs, American affairs, the issue of confiscation, the issue of the Russian frozen assets, many other issues, important issues, were in focus of the attention of the participants of the Kyiv Security Forum. And what I feel personally, that there is no despair. We are going through very difficult times, but there is no despair. And I fully agree with Arsenii Yatsenyuk that we will prevail. We have this strength, and we prove that we have this strength. I would like to thank you, Ambassador McFall. I would like to thank you, Secretary Summers, and I would like to thank you, Prime Minister Arsenii Yatsenyuk, for this conversation, and look forward to seeing you in the new victorious year of 2024. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Величезний